Or yeah, that'll work. Hi everyone. This is Danielle. I've got Kevin with me. He's going to be mostly behind the scenes as my cameraman. So I'm so happy to have all of you here. You're probably also going to see our dogs. I'll just show them to you real quick. Are you around, girls? Where'd you go? So we are really excited to make pizza with you today. And I'm not going to actually be showing you my face for a lot of this because I've got a really great camera setup thanks to Kevin. And it is going to zoom in on what I'm doing with the food. You'll still be able to hear my voice. In the chat, I've also shared the link to a doc. And this doc could be really helpful for a couple reasons. If you forget where we're at, or you lose track, or you're like, I didn't hear her, everything I'm doing is in there. And then you can also add questions. It's going to be tough for me to monitor the chat, but I'll do my best. We're going to start out by making the dough. And then while that rises, Kevin is going to give us a little cocktail making class since we need to wait. And I'll answer a couple questions. And then we'll go back and we'll top the pizzas and cook them. So this is probably going to take an hour. Just so you know, it doesn't normally take an hour to make a pizza, but because I'm going to kind of go through the steps, it'll take a little longer, so don't worry. I also see we've got lots of families and kids, and I just want to say hi to everyone. So stoked that you're in the kitchen. And yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get started. You can totally turn your mics on if you need to, but otherwise I would leave them off just because there's a lot of folks in here. And then we'll go to Q&A. So without further ado, let's switch over to, this is the scary part. Can I get the camera to switch over? Uh-oh. Zoom is struggling.
You got a lot running on your computer, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see if I can address that. Sorry, everyone, having a few technical difficulties to just actually switch cameras. There we go. Oh, there's no file in the chat yet. Let me add that again for you now. So I'm going to walk you through all the instructions as well. So if I forget something in the instruction doc, I will speak to it here as well. There you go. All right. On the main camera now. Excellent. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully audio is good. Kevin, you can maybe check the chat from time to time by joining the Zoom a different way. All right, so we're gonna get started with our yeast. And as you can see, I've got some Fleischmann's Active Dry. You can also use instant yeast if you want. It's really up to you. So we're gonna use about 3 tablespoons. If you've got a packet is usually a tablespoon and a quarter. I've pretty much got that much in here now, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with what I've got, but you should go ahead and measure out 3 tablespoons. Pizza, there's no wrong answers. This isn't quite as finicky as bread. And next up, we need about a cup of warm water. Great, so now that we combine the yeast with the warm water, all we want to do is just mix it in a little bit and then let it sit for a minute. It should start to kind of bubble and foam. If it doesn't bubble and foam at all, it's possible that that yeast is expired. It may be dead and it might not be able to begin to come alive and activate. And the warm water should help with that. So we're going to let this sit for just a minute. And while we're waiting, what we can do is we can go ahead and get some other ingredients together. So you are going to need some flour, and you're going to need some salt for this step of the process. So if you look at my yeast, I don't know how well you can see this, but it's starting to bloom. So you can kind of see like these frothy bits coming together. So every minute that we don't bake this pizza is actually kind of a blessing in disguise because it's going to get a little more fermentation going. So if you are making this and you get distracted because you maybe have a glass of wine and answer a bunch of emails in the evening, don't worry, your pizza is only going to taste better. You just might be really hungry. So what we're going to do now is we're going to feed this yeast a little bit with some flour. I don't really measure when it comes to pizza because what we're ultimately going for is a texture, but it's good to start with like half a cup or so that this can be gloopy. Like you don't really want it to be dough yet. We actually want it to be kind of sloppy as I make a mess in here. And we're going to kind of make kind of like a slushy of dough. Add another half cup. So if anyone's ever made a sponge for a cake, this is a very similar process where you're not actually starting with the dough. We're going to have like a subset of the materials that we're going to use rise. So you can see this is like pretty soft and pretty liquid. And you're also seeing a lot of bubbles from the yeast and also the air that I'm working in. So we're going to do a quick rise today. We're not going to do the whole like long fermentation process. So we're going to go ahead and we've got this and we're just going to go ahead and set it aside. Now I promised in my email that I would also speak to how to use a sourdough starter. And I have my sourdough starter here, thanks to Isabel, who I hope is watching, maybe, or I'll send her this video later. So my sourdough starter is nice and it's bubbly and it's stinky, which is great. So we're gonna get about 3 tablespoons worth of starter in here. I'm running kind of low because I've been aggressive with her lately. And one thing about the starter is if you're just seeing this and you're getting it out of your refrigerator right now, this might be a little bit rough. So when this first came out of the refrigerator a couple hours ago, it was not liquid, and so it's not going to mix very well. So I would not recommend using the sourdough starter if you haven't already taken it out or if you've been storing it in the fridge. If you store it on your counter, you are good to go. So as you can see, this is already pretty gloopy and lovely. We're going to go ahead and I'm not going to give mine any yeast. If you want to do a quick rise, you totally can. I'm just going to feed it with a little bit of flour and about a half a cup of warm water. And we're basically just going for the same texture that we had with the other one. So we're making a sponge. Now the really nice thing about a sourdough starter is you get all that fermented taste that comes with the yeast slowly eating through the flour, and the smell of this is very different. You also don't need to wait. So like we've set aside our other one to wait. With this guy, you can go straight into making your dough. Just because what's an extra 10 minutes going to do versus like many days you've had with fermentation. Cool. So I'm going to give this a little bit more group. So hopefully if you're watching right now, you're starting to get out your gear and get some good gloppy deliciousness going in the bowl. So I'm going to get these 2 doughs a little further along, and then we're going to let them rise. So I've got my sourdough starter dough kind of a little thicker. It's still pretty wet, as you can see. So we'll set that aside. And then let's actually take this first dough we did. This is the dough I expect most of you are making, this silver bowl dough, which is just the quick rise. And at this point, we can go ahead and give it a lot more flour. We're going to get this to the point where we can make a ball. So don't worry, there will be more fermentation time while we're doing other prep and while we're chopping our vegetables and our herbs, but at this point we can go ahead and form this into a ball. So I'm just mixing it in until all the flour is incorporated. It'll probably still be a little bit sticky when it comes out onto the board. And we'll add a little more flour at the end. But it's pretty hard to go back if you overdo it on the flour. It's much easier to slowly add because it's a little tough to, I mean, you could try to add water, but it's just not going to incorporate evenly. It's going to be annoying for you. So I'm erring on the side of sticky right now. Great. So now we've got my cutting board. A little flour. By the way, we're going to make a mess. We're not going to worry about that. That's part of the fun. So we got a lot of flour. It's probably going to get all over me. I'm going to turn out this dough onto the board. Awesome. Okay, yeah, it's pretty sticky. So since it's sticky, and I don't really want to lose a lot of dough on my hands because I want to ideally get to eat it all, I'm going to sprinkle some on top here, and then I'm just going to start folding it over onto itself and pushing it down. You know, you can go on YouTube and you can find all sorts of kneading techniques, but I wouldn't really worry about that when you're first learning. You can just fold it in half and then press it down with the heel of your hand. And you don't have to press it super hard. You don't need to press all the way through the board. Just pull it down, push it down about halfway. Be kind of gentle with it. And this is where we are beginning to form gluten. And gluten is a protein, and it's pretty awesome. Its strands and fibers are what's going to make this dough stretchy and supple. And the stretchier we can make the dough, the thinner we can make the crust. The thinner we can make the crust, the more pizza we can have, surface area-wise. And funny enough, for those of you who care about being healthy, obviously, the thinner the crust, the less flour you're eating. And flour has about 550 calories to a cup. So we've probably used about 2 cups of flour here, maybe a little more. So this ball of dough can make one large pizza. Sorry about my dogs. Can you just shut this door, babe? You can make 1 large pizza or 2 medium pizzas. So that 1 large pizza is going to have a kind of a base caloric value of about 1,200 calories, and medium is going to be like 600 a piece. To be honest, I don't think about calories when I think about pizza, but for those who care, I think it is kind of cool to know your nutrition facts if you're going to do like bulk cooking and you want to make sure you cover all the bases. So I'm still working this here. I generally would say you want to go for like about 2 minutes. And what you're going to notice is that the dough is going to start to get tougher, like not really from the flour, just because it's being worked so much, and it will bounce back. So it's actually not bouncing back quite enough yet. That bounce back is really the sign that you have enough gluten. And then when we set the dough aside, it's going to relax again. So when we actually want to stretch it out and form the shape for the pizza itself, it'll be back to being really satiny and wonderful. But first we got to make it work. So if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat or the doc, because I'm going to pause once we put this dough to rise, which is about a minute from now, to answer your questions and then get a little cocktail demo from Kevin. So that'll be a good time. And don't worry if you're confused and you're waiting for an answer to my question. The folks in the chat might be able to help you, or I can help you. We don't have to all finish this exactly at the same time. There's really no wrong way to make pizza. Okay.
So Tyler asks, how much flour should we add in addition to the first cup that was added with the yeast?
So I would kind of do it by feel, and the target is 1 cup additional total, but I wouldn't add it all in at once because you're going to use some flour on the board as well. So maybe a half a cup. As soon as it's sticky but it forms together into a ball, you want to turn it out onto the floured surface and do the rest of the flour that way. So it's going to be different for each person because flour, depending on the weight of the flour and the dryness of the place that you're in, it could feel pretty different. And so if I just tell you a total number of grams without knowing that, it's risky. Ultimately, you're going to get to a dough ball. You might end up using slightly more than 2 cups or slightly less. But I would just add it in gradually. So you know how I poured out a bunch of flour onto this surface? Almost all of that has been soaked up into this ball now. All right, so I think we're looking pretty good. It's bouncing back. I don't know if you can see that on camera. It's mostly bouncing back from my touch. So I'm in Colorado, where things rise very fast. So normally I would put this in the refrigerator, but the fact that things rise faster is going to help me out a lot. So why don't I answer some questions while I work this second batch of dough. Kevin, do you want to take a look in the doc, the Google Doc? It's on my computer.
Yeah.
And then you can invite people to verbalize their questions in the Zoom.
So, are you getting these as comments?
I can't see anything. No, scroll up. There's a comment section, question section at the top.
Mark, your starting instructions say 3 tablespoons of yeast, but aren't most packets teaspoons?
Yeah, I think you might be right. It might be 2 1/4. The truth is, because we're doing quick rise, it probably doesn't really matter how much we use. We just need to use enough to get some air into this. Basically, the longer you're going to rise your dough, the less yeast you're going to need.
And then I'm not sure if this was your own example question, but Danielle says, how do you feel about freezing pizza dough?
So I'm a big fan of freezing pizza dough because often I make the wrong amount. So I'll think I want to make 2 pizzas, and then Kevin and I will have a couple cocktails and realize we just need 1. So pizza dough freezes really well. I will just say it will keep rising based on the internal temperature of the dough. So don't be surprised if it busts out of the wrapping. So you might want to cool it in the refrigerator first and then wrap it to avoid some very awkward looking pizza balls. Any other questions in the Zoom chat, Kevin?
No, I think we're good.
On my question.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we should maybe switch over to you making cocktails. So I'm going to switch the camera to the FaceTime. And I'm going to say hi to everybody real quick. Can you clear the other stuff? How's everybody doing? I'm switching over to the FaceTime camera so I can see all your smiling faces while Kevin sets up his little cocktail demo. Anybody have a dough ball to show me? I see some wine, I see some dough. Hey Mark, that looks good. Oh, you got a lot. This is gonna be awesome.
So I ended up using 3 teaspoons, but it's already doubled in size in the last couple of hours.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear ya.
I used 3 teaspoons, not tablespoons, but it has about doubled in size in the last couple of hours. So is that basically the goal?
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, since you had more time, you don't need as much. And since yeast's sort of in short supply, that's a pretty good idea.
Cool.
So for the adults here, since this is not recommended for children, we're going to do a little cocktail demo. Kevin really loves to make Negronis. Kevin is my wonderful husband. So I am going to set him up to do that. I don't know, in the ice machine probably.
Okay, hey everyone. Let's maybe elevate that a tiny bit. So we're going to make a Negroni. A Negroni is an Italian cocktail. It was invented about 101 years ago by Count Negroni, who lived in Florence. You can go read more of the history of that on the internet. This is a great cocktail on a sunny day, and it has 3 ingredients. Before I walk through the ingredients, actually, the first thing while you're starting to prepare a Negroni is to get everything as cold as possible. So what you want to do is take a martini glass and just run it under some cold water. And just kind of shake out the water and throw this guy in the freezer. And it's going to chill the whole rim of the whole glass for you and get everything nice and cold. And like I said, there's 3 ingredients that you'll need. So the one essential ingredient that you can't really sub out anything for is called Campari. This is the Italian part of it. So it's an Italian digestif. It has a lot of herbs in it that have been mixed together. and fermented. And this is going to be the part of the drink that makes it either you're going to totally love it or totally hate it based on this. It's a really strange flavor, and people react in a pretty polarized way to it. The other two ingredients are sweet vermouth. There's all kinds of different sweet vermouth, but the one that I love to use is called Capano Antica, that you can find at like a Bevmo or kind of a specialty store. And then the other ingredient is gin. Today we're using Plymouth gin. You can use just about any kind of gin you want. If you become a bit of a gin connoisseur, you'll discover that some of them are really, really strong juniper flavor, which I don't think works as well in the Negroni. So if you try different gins, try to find one that's a little bit weaker on the juniper side. So Hendrix is a popular one that tastes really great that you can find in a lot of different places. Plymouth is a little more specialty, but works pretty good. Some of the other more famous gins, Bombay Sapphire. What's the one that's? I'm trying to think if there's one that's really strong juniper flavor. Terroir is really strong, so you probably don't want something like that. But you can just kind of, if you taste just the tiniest sip of the gin, you'll notice you want a more mellow one. And then we're going to take a jigger or any kind of measuring device. So we'll grab a jigger, and we're just going to pour out 3 equal pours. And we're going to pour it into this mixing guy. I'm out of ice right now, so I'm going to cheat and use a spherical ice cube that we don't really need, but it'll work. And we're just going to pour 3 totally equal shots right into there. That's our Campari. And then last but not least, the Campano Antica, or any of your sweet vermouth that you have. One of the funny things about vermouth, actually, is it's a wine. So you'll notice this bottle is a little smaller. It's not a full 750 milliliter. And because it's a wine, the vermouth will actually go bad a little bit. I don't know that you'll be able to taste it necessarily right away. But you want to get a smaller bottle and try to work through it pretty quickly the same way you would if you had a really nice red wine or white wine. So now we've got that all together. We're going to grab something to stir with, and we're just going to stir this guy up. You'll notice I'm not using a shaker. If you use a shaker and shake it vigorously, what you're going to do is you're going to chip a bunch of ice off that's going to melt in your drink, and it's just going to dilute the taste of it. So just stir it gently. It's going to mix together pretty quickly. We need some sort of strainer. Now we go to the freezer. Grab our martini glass that's all chilled, and we're just going to strain that into there. Okay. The proper way to have the drink is with orange garnish. So we're going to just grab a fresh orange and just peel off a little bit of orange. You can kind of do, you could cut it and slice it and get a little section, but I like to just get a little orange and then kind of twist it over the drink. And if you watch closely, you'll see a little explosion of little tiny citrus pellets. And throw that on there, and you have a Negroni.
And if you're
Cheers.
like me, and you don't like
You might want a glass of
Negronis,
wine.
you might want to open a bottle of wine.
So a couple other notes on the Negroni. You can serve it, I've served it up, so not on ice or on the rocks. You can serve it if you're in Italy and you order the drink. You're often going to get it served on the rocks. Usually the way that I go is if I'm outside on a patio, get it on the rocks so that it stays nice and cold. If you're sitting at home or you're at a bar and you're inside, get it served up in a martini glass. It will hold its temperature nicely and have a great flavor. Cheers. That's a Negroni. I think we're good. Do you want to go back to pizza making?
I would love to go back to pizza making. Let's do a little
clear you some space here.
clean up here real quick. Really appreciate those TV people and how they make it just look like everything magically gets switch cameras for me? The good news is now we are going to chop some vegetables. So hopefully now you have had a little bit of booze and you're ready to be brave with that knife. So just a reminder, press start video.
Yep, we're working on it.
Just a reminder, if you forgot to preheat the oven, this is a good time to preheat the oven.
What do you want to preheat it to?
As hot as it will go. So most conventional ovens will go to 500 or 550. But yeah, we want to get that oven as hot as it will go. So for our first pizza, we are going to keep it super simple, but I'm obviously not in your kitchen right now, so you may not be interested in super simple. You might want to just go for it. So what we're going to need...
Field some questions?
Sure, yeah, why don't we do that?
So Nazreen has a question. If it's taking too long to rise, is there anything I can do to help it along? Is it all right to knead it now and then?
All right, let me actually switch to video. So if it's never really taking too long to rise. It's just going to take however long it takes. But actually, when you knead it, that's going to knock the air out of it, and it's going to reduce the rise. So if possible, you actually really don't want to mess with it. The one thing you could do that might help is put it somewhere warm. So you could put it, if you have a drawer below your oven, like your oven's preheating and it's warm, you could put it there. You could put it in your laundry room or just somewhere that there's warm air. Or you can put it outside now that it's summertime, covered with a cloth. So that will help it along.
You turned the video off.
I'm trying to change it. It says, can you just be in charge of fixing the video for me?
Yep.
I can answer more questions though.
Cool.
Do you have another
You
one?
want it back here?
Yes. Let me know when it's back on.
We'll be back to video in just a second, folks.
I was trying to switch to face now. I think I should probably stop switching back and forth. Necessary.
Wow, it's really thinking carefully about that. There we go.
All right, well, we're not going to switch the video too much. So what we're going to do on our first pizza is we're just going to do sauce, fresh mozzarella cheese, some oregano, and if I had basil, I would put basil on fresh afterwards, but I don't. So I want to show you a little trick that I've loved. So while I'm doing this, if these are not the toppings that you're going to use, what I would recommend that you do is you just get your toppings prepped. So, for example, I've already prepped some onions here, and they're just, can you turn the video so I can see myself? Because I don't know if I'm in the frame. These are onions that have been kind of like rustically cut, so they're not perfect or anything. And then we also have some peppers that are just been put into slivers. So the smaller you cut up vegetables, the better for a pizza, because it's just going to let you spread them out more, and they're going to give off a lot of water. But one thing we can do that's really wonderful is we can use fresh herbs. So this is fresh oregano, and awesome trick that I've learned recently. So picking the leaves off the oregano, super annoying, right? You just can hold it flat and just take them off with the knife. Or that'll happen. See, this is the slow way. And
We do a quick dough question.
this is the fast way. Yes, we can.
So Raha asks, Danielle, we did pre-mix yeast in 1 cup and put it in the fridge 2 to 3 hours ago. We just added another cup or so now. What should the ball feel like?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I would definitely keep it out of the fridge now. And the ball should be feeling kind of silky. It shouldn't be sticky at all. And when you push the dough down, actually I can show you because mine's looking pretty good. It should kind of have like a bit of a film on the top, but when you press it down or you like stick your fingers in it, like the underside of it is like it's pretty soft. Try not to mess with it too much because it's still rising.
Can I zoom in for a second
yeah,
when you
totally.
touch it? And here, 1 second. Let me handle this for a second. And
not
let's see,
focused.
let's get it in focus. Okay, so go ahead and keep it down.
They said it makes sense in the chat. I'd like we should keep going.
Okay.
Thanks, cameraman. Love you. All right. So what I want to do now is we're buying some time from a class perspective to let the dough rise, but also when you're cooking at home and you're trying to get this done really efficiently, say you come home from work or school or whatever and you want to make pizza, if you get the dough going first, that's kind of what gets the momentum for the rest of the project. So like once you have the dough rising, I basically just make myself a rule, like whatever toppings I can prep in the time it takes the dough to rise, that's what gets to go on the pizza. And that makes it pretty efficient. So I've got some oregano, I'm just gonna chop this up. You've got some onions, some shallots, some peppers. Pretty much any nightshade is gonna be awesome. Obviously sliced tomatoes are amazing. Garlic is great. If you wanna do greens like arugula, then you put those on fresh afterwards. You don't bake those in the oven, they just wilt and become crusty. But they're delicious. If you've been to like south of France, putting arugula on pizza is super popular. Mushrooms are great. I'll just give you a sampling of the kinds of toppings that we've got here for the different pizzas. And I'm going to top a bunch of pizzas just to give you some ideas. But yeah, mushrooms are really great. Peppers are great. Onions. What else did I bring out here? Oh, will you put my starter back in the fridge, babe? Dice up some garlic here. Also delicious. So you just want to get yourself a little buffet of toppings. And then of course we need cheese. So I've got some, this is the problem, once the cheese comes out, I just want to eat it all. I've got some fresh mozzarella here. If you've got like a mozzarella ball that doesn't come pre-sliced, it's actually going to look way prettier if you tear it up. But this came pre-sliced, so that's what we got. Now remember, cheese is going to melt, so you don't need to be a perfectionist about that. Other thing is, I'm a big fan of combining your cheeses, so I've also got some, what is this, Parmigiano Reggiano here. That's going to go on after. And then I've also got low moisture cart skim mozz. So this is probably what you're seeing in the store a lot. This stuff's great. You do not need fresh mozzarella. Mozzarella cheese, both the fresh and the bag stuff, lasts a really long time in the fridge, and you can freeze it. So for anybody who's like a prepper out there or is worried about access to food, maybe you're somewhere rural, I think it's a really great bulk buy to look for deals. All right, so we've got our toppings. We've also got two options for sauce. I love the Whole Foods pizza sauce. After making a lot of pizza sauces that are complicated, I've realized it's a lot of work. Their ingredients include organic tomatoes, tomato puree, extra virgin olive oil, sea salt, basil, and garlic. So making sauces work. This is $3. The other option is just straight up tomato sauce that has no seasoning in it. Tomato sauce is actually pretty amazing if you buy it in the can. It's very acidic. And that is the classic taste that you're getting from pizza. And we would just add a little bit of sea salt. So get your sauce options figured out. Basically, if you start with something more basic, you're just going to need more salt and garlic to make it more interesting. But either option is great. So we've got our little topping buffet here, which is very exciting. I'll kind of push that out of the way somewhat. All right, so I'm very curious to maybe put you all on camera real quick. Who wants to share their dough? How their dough is looking? And just so you know, if you want to see how everybody's dough looks, go to gallery mode and you can see everybody. Yeah, all right, I see lots of dough. This is so cool. I can't believe we're all cooking together. This is like my dream. All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. All right, so we're going to turn this dough back out now. But before you do, If you don't feel ready yet, if you think maybe your dough is not puffy enough, that's okay. It's all good. Our goal this time is to not knock out the air. So there's lots of air in here. We want to gently pour this out. Look how fluffy this got. This doubled, more than doubled in size, just while we were hanging out. This is the quick rise, just the classic one. So what we're gonna do to form our crust is we're gonna basically start to flatten this baby out. Now this is a pretty big dough. Honestly, you could use half of this dough. I'm very tempted to use half. Oh well, whatever. Okay, we're gonna use it all. So the first step is we're gonna, if you think about what a pizza looks like, right? The crust is on the outside. So we want to leave the crust as puffy as we possibly can. So believe it or not, that's a pizza. Just, I wouldn't want to put that in the oven because I think it would be basically the weirdest breadset ever. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of flatten out the center, make a hole. This is how you're going to set this up for like a beautiful circle. See how the crust is tearing like this? Have you ever noticed when the crust looks like this when it comes out in the restaurant? You want to preserve all that detail. So now we're going to flip it over. And we're just going to push it out a little bit more. This should feel kind of weird, like my hand doesn't really fit in here. So we're going to move to parchment paper soon. You might notice, by the way, that stuff's sticking. Use a lot of flour at this stage. We're going to have an opportunity to knock that off. And so once you've got, kind of turn it over a couple times and you've got it pretty flat in the middle, now we've got all this crust to work with. How are we going to form it? So you want to take your hands like this, back, bottom and top, and we're going to gently stretch the dough outward, like this. Gently stretch it apart and lay it flat so it makes a bigger and bigger circle. And right now, I want you to not get wed to the idea like, oh, this side's more perfect, that's the top, and this side's like less perfect, that's the bottom. Flipping it over and over is going to be what keeps it from sticking, and every time you pick it up, it's stretching it out more. So also, this is not the part where you rush. Like, I generally like to stop and have a little bit of wine in the middle of this part because this is the part where you're like, oh my god, it's a pizza, now I'm really hungry. And then you tear a hole in your pizza and it's quite annoying. So what happens if you do tear a hole in your dough? Well, first of all, the reason you get holes is usually because there's not enough gluten. But generally, like, so I'm gonna do this even though it makes me crazy. Okay, I've got torn a hole in my dough somehow from stretching. All you need to do is bring your hand underneath and push the dough over the top and seal it again. But like, give it more than enough coverage to really shore up that hole. And you need to kind of remember where that spot is because that's now your weak spot. That's probably going to be your problem spot later on. Now, if you're like me and you don't have like a humongo cutting board, at some point the pizza gets too big for cutting boards. And now it's time for us to migrate to parchment paper, which is what we're going to cook on anyway. So this is kind of the place where your gear may vary. I got my own gear bin. So I'm going to show you a couple options first. Before I do it my way. So people ask me, do you need expensive kitchen gear to make a good pizza? And the answer is no, but this is the pizza pan. So when you go and you shop, this is from Calphalon. This is probably the most common thing you'll see. So this is aluminum, so that means it's not going to get super hot and it's not going to be super conducive, but what it will do is it will let a lot of heat and warm air through the bottom. So the goal of that is to make a crispy crust. I've cooked on this one a lot. These are cookie sheets. Only downside of cookie sheets is they're fairly small, but these are round cookie sheets. Everyone seems to have these. I think I have had these since college or something. These are fine. These ones are also aluminum, so again, same problem and no air holes. So not great. You're going to get a breadier pizza crust. What I migrated to is just cooking with parchment baking paper and then laying it directly onto a pizza stone, which I have in my oven, and they cost like maybe 30 bucks. So as soon as you're making pizzas a lot, it starts to be worth it. So the pizza stone sits in the oven, and it's been in there while it's been preheating. It's just getting super, super hot. You can actually also cycle your oven on the cleaning cycle and get it even hotter. And we're not going to do that today because I don't want to burn the house down. So parchment paper is nice because we can make our pizza like a weirder shape, and that's not a problem. So let's, oh, I did get a little hole, probably in that spot. All right. So let's get our pizza onto the parchment. And let's do some final shaping. Now, the truth is, the dough is still rising. It's going to keep rising until it goes in the oven. So you don't need to worry if you flatten out your crust too much. Don't worry about that. Also, no one's going to see this. So like, yeah, it's kind of ugly, but whatever. It doesn't matter. No shame in pizza or baseball. So now this is an important step. Oh, I've got some good questions here, Kevin. Can you help me out with them?
Yeah.
I don't want to keep going until we make sure everybody's good on the shaping.
Yeah, so Dan asks, what rack in the oven do we need to cook this on?
Oh, yes. I recommend the middle, mostly so you can get air circulation in the bottom and the top. If you have a heating element, like an actual like heated rod as opposed to air, you might want to move it down because the risk is just that the top could burn before the bottom. Unfortunately for me, I've had to do a lot of trial and error to figure this out. But basically, we're trying to have the pizza cook evenly.
And then Michelle asks, if we're using a round paella pan, should we use parchment paper or put some oil or cornmeal in the bottom of the pan?
You know, I haven't done that before, so I will say you can never go wrong with parchment paper. I would not recommend oil. I would use something dry. So, but I think parchment paper is a good option. Basically doing what I'm doing here and then laying it into the pan.
Okay, and then Tyler asks, what if we have a thin spot? What's the best way to fix that?
You know, that's probably going to be the tastiest spot. As long as there's not an actual hole, it's not really a big deal. So the problem with a hole is that water or like oil is going to seep underneath the pizza and it's going to cause the bottom to get soggy. But if it's just a thin spot, you just want to make sure that you don't break through that spot. So I'm brushing off the excess flour that's on this side. And the reason is I'm going to put some olive oil down. And if you put the olive oil directly onto like a big pile of flour, it just turns into kind of this goopy paste. And you will just have a soggier crust. It's a little counterintuitive because we're like brushing off the dry ingredients. So obviously we want lots of flour on the bottom. And this doesn't have to be perfect, by the way. It's just, I had some like pretty good chunks in there. Let's get those off. It's fine if they're on the crust, like on the outer crust that you're going to eat, but just try to get them off the middle. All right, cool. Do you have any other questions, Kevin?
We're caught up.
Do you want to check the doc too? Shaping is usually the hardest part for new pizza makers, so I just want to make sure everybody's feeling really good. By the way, I'm putting lots of flour underneath, especially if you're new to this completely. Don't be shy about flouring it up. You can always knock it off with a fork afterwards.
Okay, Nazreen asked, sorry, what are you brushing on right now?
Oh, I'm actually not brushing anything on. I'm brushing the flour off. So I'm just using a dry pastry butt brush to just take all the excess flour off the top. Any other questions?
Nope.
Cool. All right, well, we're ready to start topping this thing. Just a reminder so that you don't end up sad. You should definitely preheat your oven if you forgot to do that. That is probably the number one thing we see people get screwed up on with the British Baking Show in like the first episode. You don't want to be that guy or gal. All right, so now we've got our beautiful pizza. We're going to start with a thin coating of olive oil.
While you're doing that, Eunice has a question. Is there an ideal thickness to shoot for?
The truth is, the thinnest possible that you can have without getting a hole is the ideal. I think when you're just starting out, that has so many other risks to the quality of the pizza. So I would just shoot for like a quarter of an inch. I guess less than a quarter of an inch is still pretty thick. An eighth of an inch would be achievable for someone who's pretty new to this. The problem is the holes and the liquid seeping through makes it so much less good that it's not really worth the risk when you're just starting out. And this is still going to taste great. This is just the difference between like Napolitano, like thin real Italian pizza versus like, we're kind of maybe a little more on the Papa John's level with this one that I've got right now. And I love Papa John's. But yeah, the dream pizza is super thin. in my opinion. All right, so this is a thin coating. Kevin, I don't know, I guess you don't need to zoom, you're pretty zoomed in. So you don't even need to really coat it, so don't worry about being perfect. Basically what this does is it lets us have amazing flavor and richness without having to use a ton of sauce. So like all those places you've been with like extra sauce, deep dish pizzas, the struggle is how do you not have the soggy bottom? And that's just really difficult in these conventional ovens because they don't get hot enough. So this is a really good strategy for also not needing a lot of sauce means that this goes longer. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use my classic, this is just tomato sauce, this doesn't have any herbs in it or anything yet. And I'm gonna give it a little bit. So you're gonna be surprised when you spread this out, you actually do want to see the crust underneath. You don't want like a super thick coat, and it doesn't need to be perfect. I tend to try to push the sauce out towards the edges since they're thicker. We want to leave the center somewhat like light on liquid. It's still going to taste great, but that's our riskiest place for like sogginess. So I'm going to kind of give the outer edge a little more, but I'm going to leave the center pretty light. Kevin, we might have some questions about this because I feel like this is
We're good.
more controversial. You might be thinking like, they have so much sauce, like just make another pizza. This is also how you can make your pizzas be healthier. It's just by not loading with quite as much stuff. All right, so now this is when we get to start seasoning it. And the first thing we're going to use is some kind of salt. So this is Malden flake salt. You can use kosher, you can use fine, you can use whatever you want. We're going to grind this up pretty fine anyways. We sprinkle it on the pizza. Now, we did not put any salt in our dough. So this is actually, probably feels like a lot of salt to you. This is probably the only salt the pizza is going to get other than if you put meat on it. So a vegetarian pizza is going to need more salt than a normal pizza. It's an important thing to know. All right. I think there's a question in the chat, babe.
Yeah. The question is this just tomato sauce from a can?
Yes, it is. In fact, I wonder if we have some more cans. Yes, this is just tomato sauce from the can with no seasoning. I think it's organic, but yeah, you'd be amazed. But it's not paste, it's sauce. So it's like more of a puree texture. All right, so we've got salt and pepper. Now, order of toppings is religious to some people. The way I would think about it is, what do you want burned, what do you want golden brown, and what do you want soft? And that's the order. So for example, I don't want to burn these beautiful herbs because they won't taste good, and they're so small. So I'm gonna put them first. I want them soft. I want them to kind of meld into the sauce and be delicious, but I don't want them to turn brown. So that's the question of like what goes before the cheese. Now, there's different opinions about this, and if you're doing meat right now, by the way, this is when I put the meat on. I put on the meat before the cheese. The really delicious thing is to put on meat and then cheese and then more meat, but your mileage may vary. I also think garlic is an interesting one. Garlic is delicious golden brown, but it's also delicious soft and roasted underneath the cheese. So I'm going to put a little garlic underneath, and I'm going to come back and I'm also going to put a little bit on top. All right, and then time for fresh mozzarella. So you might notice, like, I just dump stuff on there and then I rearrange. People try to get all precious with designs. Like, it's all gonna melt, so just don't stress. Also, you don't need it to be like complete cheese coverage. I mean, I need it to be that from like a philosophical standpoint, but like it'll still taste good. So if you run out of cheese or you miss a spot, it's all good. And you might be thinking, well, what about these herbs that we talked about? We don't want to burn them. Don't worry, it's going to melt. They're going to be covered. So what else have we got? This is our simple pizza. I guess I'll do what I said I would do and just not overdo it on this guy. Kevin, anything else you really want on this one?
Oh, we gotta do the peppers.
Oh yeah, I forgot. So Kevin likes things really spicy. So These Calabrian peppers are amazing. And they come in oil. So the oil is also amazing. I use them for pizza sauce. So, oops, there's some oil. What's going on there? We are just going to fish a few of these babies out and just lay them on our pizza. This is a very optional thing because these are pretty spicy.
I would. What if we chop these?
You want to chop them up?
Yeah, let's chop them real
All right.
quick. I can do that. Cool.
You want to just grab them off the pizza and chop those? Can you shoot on camera?
Yep. All right, let's get in here.
I don't think they can see what you're chopping, so why don't I move the pizza out of the way? I'll come get it. All right, so I'm gonna actually, can you film what I'm doing? Because this is actually a thing.
Yeah.
It'll help a lot of people.
It's filming.
Yeah, I can't see the end of the table. So I'm gonna transfer this pizza onto a cutting board. This is helpful because people are always like, well, what do I do now that it's on this parchment paper?
Okay, we got it.
So we're just gonna grab it like that. There we go.
Cool.
All right, chop chop, baby.
All right, let's chop these up. So these are Calabrian chilies. And we're just going to line them up and put the town up. All right, there's a lot of oil in there. Okay, we'll bring this back, put some peppers on it.
How many questions? Good.
All right, pepperify.
All right. Once your hands are clean, you want to show me putting this in the oven?
Yeah.
How do you want to do that?
1 second. Need Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right, turn the oven light on. So we got our pizza stone in the oven. You can go tight it on that a little. It's out of focus though.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, be careful. I have some pretty good burns on my hands in life. So use your gloves. That is going to cook super fast. All right, so while that's in, what we can do is we can go back, if you want, to do your second pizza. Can you clean this off for me, Dave?
Okay, 1 second.
So for some of you, I know you were thinking about making more than one crust. And I thought it would also be good to show you some different topping approaches. So we'll just top another pizza here. That's going to take about, depends on your pan and your oven, anywhere from 7 minutes if it's directly on a stone and it's super hot, all the way to like 20 to 25 minutes to cook. My recommendation is that you take your phone or your computer that you're on right now, once you put it in the oven, and you just sit and you watch it. And then whenever you think it's ready to come out, give it like 2 minutes more. I have a feeling in about 10-15 minutes, we're all going to be giving each other a little therapy as we figure out, like, is my pizza ready or not? But while we wait, I'm going to go ahead and top another pizza. Kevin, are there any questions?
Yeah, while that's in there, Ms. Reen asks, could you drizzle olive oil on the toppings?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if the toppings are really dry, the olive oil will help a lot. Another thing you can do is you can drizzle it on when it comes out of the oven, kind of once you see what the grease level is. For the vegetarian pizza, I highly recommend it. For the meat pizzas, usually the meat gives off enough oil where you will kind of find it to be too greasy. Great question. A little mise en place here. All right, so now we have our second dough. This is the one that I did with the sourdough starter. And I actually gave it and punched it down a little bit because it got really big. So let's go ahead and get our cutting board back. Turn this one out on the flour as well. So for this one, I'm going to show you what I had been thinking about the previous, which was like, wow, that seems like a lot of dough. I really want to make a thinner crust. So for this guy, I'm going to take it and we're going to cut it in half. You want to saran wrap one of these?
Sure.
So we're going to cut it in half and we're going to just form a ball. I'm still being pretty gentle, trying not to knock too much air out. Yeah, wrap it loose because it's pretty warm. Very hard. There you go. All right, so we've got our ball. And you might be thinking, well, this is going to be a much smaller pizza. It probably will still be a pretty big pizza. It's just going to have a much thinner crust. So same deal. Kind of put your palm, this. Wedding ring marks on the pizza, you know, we're committed like that. So same thing. We're just making it really thin now in the center and then starting to work our way out. Again, remember, this is where you're going to want to rush it. I just got myself tempted, so I'm going to stop and have a sip of wine. I'm going to keep an eye on that one. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's a good time to check on your first pizza if it's already in. Thought we should have a Valley Andy. Something wrong with it. All right, so because we're doing a thinner one, this is definitely where, if you didn't get enough gluten, you're gonna get holes. So we're gonna spend more time patching the pizza. Don't worry about that too much. I think I already feel one hole. So one motion that's really hard to do on a cutting board that is easier to do on the parchment because the parchment rotates is this washing motion like this. I'm gonna switch over. By the way, where do I learn this stuff? I sit at the counters of pizza restaurants and I watch the chefs. And they go so fast and it's so amazing. Like, what's that pizza place we love for New Year's Eve?
Cart driver.
Cart driver. At Cart driver, I think they turn out, you know, what, you think 20 pizzas every 20 minutes? I'm turning out a lot of pizza. Freezer. Try to stop that fermentation in its tracks. So you can see, like, this is getting pretty big, but also, I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of very light window pane action.
Tyler has a question.
Yeah.
Was the amount of dough in the directions supposed to be for one pizza or two?
So it is one pizza for a newbie, and it's probably two pizzas once you get comfortable forming it into a super thin pizza. So when I started out, that's how much dough I made for a single pizza, which is the first one we did. And once I got better at making the crust thinner without tearing holes and going crazy, then I realized I could cut it in half and I could make two. So there's no wrong answer, but to get started, to guarantee that you're happy today, I'd probably go with one. Oh, there's my first hole. Patch you up, buddy. I kind of made this class assuming a lot of newbies, but if you are more advanced and you want to, you know, go for the super thin like what I'm doing now, awesome. I mean, I'm not advanced either, by the way. I still put holes in my pizza pie all the time. All right, so we're going to transfer this to some parchment. Would you put this lid back on the flapping chilies? If I spill that oil, the dog will get it, and then who knows what will happen. By the way, it's really important not to use wax paper. Wax paper will absolutely melt in the oven and probably catch on fire, I don't know. You want to use parchment paper. So they are not substitutes for each other in this context. Parchment paper actually will catch on fire too if you actually leave it long enough, but we're not going to do that.
Carlene asked a question, can we use a rolling pin for the dough, or does that change the crust?
Yeah, so you can, but what will happen is, you know how I'm trying to be super delicate about the outer edge, trying to like let that part keep the air? If you use the rolling pin, it's just, you know, you roll all the way over that, you're going to knock all the air out. However, if you're doing a flatbread, or if you like really crispy crust and you don't care, you can totally do it. It's just not going to, it takes a while for the bubbles to reform. And we can't let the pizza sit out too long because the dough will start to get kind of gushy, and then we have a risk that it's going to stick to the paper. But you can totally do it. And you'll see restaurants that do it. You can also get a mini rolling pin, like the kind that they use for ravioli makers, and just roll the center. We have one actually, Kevin. All right, hey baby, this is like your style pizza right here. So when you're doing this thinner crust pizza, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, how much of this crust do I need to be so persnickety and protective of? I'm pretty much putting my hand all the way out like that. So it's really only like a ½ an inch of crust. So what's going to happen is that's going to puff up so much if you don't knock the air out that it's going to be airy and delicious. Like, you'll know you did it right if there's actually big air bubbles in your crust. Okay, this is about done. Also, I didn't do semolina, but you can absolutely put semolina onto your finished product underneath, and it's a different texture, and it's tasty, and it's a great way to line your pizza pan. So, a little sticky. If that's something you're into, if you like that taste, if you're Italian, you probably just like, what do you mean it's optional? How's our first baby looking?
It's getting interesting. But
Getting
it's not
interesting? So why don't you want to take the camera and show them what interesting but not done looks like?
There. Sure.
So this is the hardest part, is figuring out when it's done. And we just learned, like, the temptation to take it out too early is very strong.
I'm not going to leave the door open long, but just so you get a sense of it. You can tell the dough's not quite golden brown yet.
And the cheese is not quite like golden brown either. All right, so I'm washing my pastry brush real quick so we can brush off the flour. Pizza number 2. So we're about an hour in, and normally I don't make 2 pizzas. Usually just make 1. We sit down, we eat. What would you say, Kevin? From like start to finish, pizza for us maybe 30 minutes.
Yep.
On a work night.
Yep.
Yeah, so pizza's a good one. The other thing is, like, once you kind of train your family to help prep the pizza, like Kevin, who knows how to cook with the toppings and everything, you can get a pretty good assembly line going where, like, I handle the crust and the dough and preheating the oven, and he handles chopping stuff up. So, like, by the time I'm ready to go with the dough, he's got a couple vegetables to throw on there. So, I mean, I think this is an incredible food to cook with kids because, first of all, kids are super creative and they make better designs than we do. So that's definitely one thing to delegate to them. But the other thing is just, like, they'll come up with flavor creations you might not expect. One thing that's delicious, of course, is to crack an egg or 2 onto your pizza after it's been in the oven about half the time. So, yeah, some things to think about. All right, so this is our second crust. We've brushed off all of the flour. So we're going to do this one a little differently. This one we're going to put meat on. And we're also going to load it up with a bit more variety of vegetables. But because our crust is thinner, we actually need to be really smart about how we top this because we just don't have as much moisture we can work with. So one of the reasons that you'll find they don't load pizzas with toppings in restaurants is not because they're stingy, it turns out, but because it just becomes harder and harder to make a good pizza the more toppings that you have. And I'm kind of a glutton, so I really think to myself, like, oh, like I have all this cheese right here, I should just put this on. Sometimes less is absolutely more. So this one I'm going to salt it first. And what else do I want to put on here? I'm going to put the onions on. And I'm going to give it a little bit of sauce, but not a whole lot. Let's see if I have some spoons. Hook me up with a spoon, babe. So this is the pre-made pizza sauce. It's flavorful. So again, everything's going to melt. So what this is going to do is it's going to create more like a flatbread base. The sauce will spread out a lot, but it won't completely spread out. And you have to think, like, how big is a bite, right? Like, what needs to be in a bite for a bite to be good? Not every bite has to be exactly the same. Some cheese on here. And this one, I'm going to put some cheese. And then I'm going to layer some meat, and then I'm going to layer more cheese. The garlic. So what I'm doing is I'm going to save the thing that gives the most water, which is these peppers, for the very, very, very top. So this is calabrese. This is spicy sausage. It's quite good. One thing with your meat is you need to make sure there's space between the pieces. If you don't, the amount of grease that you're going to have is going to be much higher because it won't be able to escape down underneath where the meat is placed. So they need to not be touching. Cool, so this is spicy sausage, it's delicious, but it also is pretty fatty, so it's gonna burn if it's on the top, so we're gonna actually put some cheese on top of it. But this time what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this low moisture mozzarella. Maybe I think we're like a little out of focus, no, maybe not. So we're gonna go ahead and top this with the mozz. Kevin, you want to see if there's any questions?
We're good.
Okay, cool. And then last thing we're going to put on here, and this can be in a prettier design, I guess, is I'm going to put some peppers. This is where the OCD in you and the OCD in me can hang out. Probably got someone in your family who would find it very satisfying to decorate a pizza like this. On top. This is going to be a very different oregano experience from what we had in the other ones. The other one, the oregano was in the bottom. This oregano is going to get dry and brown, and it's going to cook right into the cheese. So pretty different.
So Nathan has a question. Hi Danielle, do you ever turn the pizza in the oven while it's cooking?
You know, I'm really lucky. My oven seems to cook fairly evenly, but if you notice one section where the cheese is turning brown before the others, that's usually a sign that you need to rotate it. The other thing is, it's usually that's a sign that the bottom's also cooking unevenly. So I've been fortunate, but I would watch the way your cheese is browning and see if you need to do that. If you're cooking in a pizza oven, the reason that you rotate it is to avoid sticking. I'm going to use the rest of this garlic, huh? Cool. Garlic's done. I think this one's done. I tempted to put more on it, but it seems perfect. What do you think, Kevin?
It looks pretty good. It's pretty loaded.
I think it's loaded. Locked and loaded.
That's a lot of moisture that's going to need to cook.
Yeah, so this is cool design, but also it's actually intentional to not have like the moisture-giving stuff in the very middle. All right, well.
Maybe this is a good moment to look at the pizza in the
Yeah,
oven.
because people have got questions about time in the oven. Can you tell me what they're saying?
Yeah, coming up on 9 minutes, and the cheese is turning brown. Time to pull it out? Question mark.
Oh, it's so tricky. So if it's turning brown, I wouldn't pull it out. If it's evenly golden brown across the top with very little like white stuff, then it might be ready. One thing you can look for is the crust will start to kind of come up off of the side a little bit, because you want to make sure the bottom is cooked. That's what we're really worried about. Let's actually check this one we have, and maybe we can see if there's a good example.
Yeah.
I'll get some gloves on. So this is where I have to talk a little bit about like not being too precious with your food. You're gonna have to touch it to learn whether or not it's good. All right. So this is probably done. So the way we can tell, are you able to show? So all the cheese is turned golden brown. It's got some grease on top. And also, when I try to pick it up, it lifts up. Look at this, actually. This is awesome. This is exactly the dream. Like, this is lifted right up, and the bottom is done. So, this is your ideal situation. I would not recommend trying to lift your pizza up like that. It's just so obviously stable that we know we did a good job.
Cool.
So, yeah.
So, Carla asked, what are the herbs you're using for this current one that we haven't cooked yet?
The herbs?
Yeah.
It's oregano again. I always think thyme and sage and rosemary are great, and I have some. I find rosemary can be very dry. So if you're going to do kind of like an Italian mix, I actually do recommend the store-bought bottle that's like the Italian herbs that are pre-blended for you. And Kevin, you want to just do camera again? I think we're going to stick this other pizza in the oven.
Sure.
Get it on over. Look at that. Yes, Taco. Oh, I gotta wear gloves. I have to burn my hands. Not today. I haven't burned them today. That one, the dough literally started puffing the second it went in the oven. Cool. So this other pizza here is cooling, and I actually want to talk a bit about cutting pizzas and when to cut them and how to serve them. Cool. So this is a beautiful pizza. We know we've done a good job because look at this. You just pick it up and it doesn't fall apart, and it's got nice golden brown on the bottom. One thing we did, because we were kind of doing beginner mode, is we did put a lot of flour on the bottom of this pizza to make sure that it wouldn't stick. And I highly recommend you do this. So we're just going to knock a little bit of that flour off. Get this. While it's still hot, and while no liquid has come in contact with it, actually you can see where that hole was too. You can see the repair, like a little bit of liquid came through there. Now you do not need to be this precious, but like I put a lot of flour on here. So I was like, I'm not gonna cook for a bunch of people on the internet and then have it stick. And like if you're cooking for other people, sometimes it's nice just to have a little insurance policy. It won't taste bad if that's on there, just won't be quite as good. All right. So it's still pretty hot. If you can, I would let it sit for like a couple minutes. Just, of course, this is an opportunity to have another sip of your wine. I'm really curious. I feel like people are probably in their critical moment of taking their pizzas out, so let's just make sure we're here to answer questions, Kevin. Are there any other ones?
We're caught up on questions right now, but add more if you have them.
Yeah, please add the questions to the chat or the doc. Did you check the doc too? So I just want to make sure everyone gets their pizza out when they want it out. By the way, you can always put your pizza back in the oven, so it's It's not the end of the world if you take it out too early. It just might be a little doughy. I put too much cheese on mine. Sounds like a high quality problem. It's probably going to be very gooey, but I mean, I don't know if there is such a thing as too much cheese in life. I would love to see it if there's really such a thing. Took it out. How long do you have to wait to cut? Yeah. Help me in heaven. I can't see these all.
Yeah. Nazreen asked, took mine out. Could you have a look?
Yeah.
Let's take a look, Nazreen, on your camera.
Yeah, go ahead and turn on your mic so that it will switch to you, Nazreen, and show us your pizza.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, here you go.
So show us your
It
pizza.
was a
Oh,
thick
wow.
crust. It was a thick crust. I think really thick and chewy, but does it look brown enough?
I can't get off mute.
Hello.
Can you respond in the chat for me? Say something in the chat that I can't get off mute. Okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry, couldn't get off mute for a second there, Nazreen.
Oh.
I would probably put it in for 5 more minutes if your oven is still on, just until that cheese gets a little more golden brown. Then and like that doughiness, that like chewiness will go away. But it looks beautiful. Your toppings are gorgeous.
Thank you.
And if you didn't have your oven on and you were like, I just need to feed some hungry humans, I think it would be just fine. It's just 5 more minutes, you've got it perfect.
So Chase asks, how long do you wait to cut?
Well, I want to serve it when it's still warm, but like when it first came out, it was untouchable. Now I can actually pick it up with my bare hands, so maybe 5 minutes. I'm actually going to cut it now.
And then Kim has a very important question. She asks, what's the ideal pizza to wine ratio?
Oh, I mean, I love wine. I won't lie. And I would say, you're serious? I don't know if there is ever such a thing as too much wine, except for you get quite a hangover. I'm kind of a 1 piece to 1 glass person. And I mean, like, 6 ounce pour, so we're not crazy glasses here. But so that's, for me, I'm a 3 piece of pizza person, so I'm a 3 glass of wine person. I don't know, would you hang out with a 3 glass of wine person, Kevin?
Absolutely. By the way, if you drink the Negroni that I made on stream, 1 Negroni is about 3 drinks, so be careful with those.
All right, so now we get to show off my favorite tool, which is my pizza guillotine. This is a specialty object, so I realize that it's not what everybody has in their home, but I love this thing. I think it's totally worth buying one. If I didn't use this, my next best option for cutting pizza is honestly scissors, pizza scissors. But I love this, so I'm just going to show you how this works. So you're going to kind of line it up so it's straight, and you're going to crunch through the crust on each side. Ooh, mine's a little chewy also, I can hear. And it just cuts beautifully, clean cut. I'll actually show you another technique, because I know we won't have that damn thing. Pizza cutter. The most important thing about a pizza cutter is don't try to roll it all the way. Pizza cutter is cut from the center out, like that. And they're really meant for like crushing through the crust, which is usually pretty hard. Be careful with pizza cutters. It's really easy to cut your palm. Pay attention to where your hand is. But yeah, so that's the thing I didn't know about pizza cutters is cut from the center. If you try to like roll over from the outside, it's like cut chunk and then destruction and then another chunk. But yeah, I'm just gonna use this guy because look at that. It's just so satisfying. So I bought this on Williams Sonoma, which I think was a gift from someone who knows how much I love pizza. And yeah, so the best part for cleaning this is the blade comes out. So the blade goes in the dishwasher, but the dowel that's wood doesn't. If you put this in the dishwasher, it's going to expand, and you're not going to be able to get the blade back into the dowel for a while, for a few days. So we'll deal with that later. So my pizza is a little more on the bready side. So a few ways we know it's good pizza. One is the front of it is not like flopping down. It's pretty stable. Another thing we can see is we can see pretty good aeration in the crust, pretty good bubbles. Probably could do even better. It's a little bready, but it's going to taste delicious. And the best thing about it is like the ratio. Crispy, a little bit of bread, and crunch. And because my husband is the ultimate judge of this, take a bite, baby.
Let's give it a shot. That's pretty good.
A little flour on the bottom.
It's a lot of flour on the bottom, but we can work through that.
How's that one looking?
Pizza 2's got a ways to go.
I like it. I like the spice. So I really like to use a cake tray for serving pretty much everything. Probably the British baking show has warped my brain. Look at that. You want to take some more questions, babe?
I think we're caught up on questions.
Cool. Well, we're waiting for the other pizza to come out. And I know we're at about an hour and a half. I said this would take maybe 60 to 90 minutes. So I just want to make sure everybody feels free to hop off and enjoy the evening with the people that you love. But I'm going to come back on camera in just a second just to say hello to my face.
So Tyler has a kind of question / observation. He says his pizza dough crust is definitely done, but the sauce, the tomato sauce, is still pretty runny.
Oh, it's going to be runny. Tyler, I think what will happen for your sauce is it's just going to thicken as it cools. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. You might have used too much, it's possible. So you can see like this dough, the crust, it keeps cooking when you take it out, and the crust starts to soak up the moisture more. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. The whole pizza is going to basically be liquid on top when you take it out. So one other piece of blasphemy I have to tell you is I really like dipping my pizza crust in French dressing. It's really good. Or balsamic vinegar and olive oil. I'm gonna check my baby. Okay, I want to say hi to everybody real quick. I really want to see your pizzas. Any other pizzas come out of the oven? I want to see all your smiling faces. Let me switch over here. Do I have flour all over my face? Probably. Oh, a little bit. All right. Thank you so much for doing my class. This is cool, and I don't know, just kind of a weird random brainchild, so I'm like thrilled there are people here. I see pizzas. If you click on the upper right, there's a gallery view. Hey Chase, do you want to come off mute and tell us about your pizza?
Yeah, it's just a basic, it's half pesto and then half tomato base.
Amazing. Looks so good. Kim, you said you ate your first pizza already. Do you want to talk to us a little more about it?
Okay, honey, talk.
It was awesome. So we've got the second one in there right now, and we did a split because my husband likes different things than me. So the first one, we did some meat and mushrooms and onions and
All that stuff.
and then we also used burrata on my side.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Wow.
the plain tomato, and then I put the fresh burrata and basil on it. So it was awesome.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Well, so that was a great tip. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was fun. Great. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next one.
Oh, wonderful. Michelle, you and your, I don't know, is it your daughter, your sister? I'm not sure. The two of you look like you're hard at work.
It's my daughter Kate, who's 15
Hi.
and is a great cook. She can make pasta and pies from scratch by herself, so she's big help. And we're debating about our pizza because the top is super browned and done, but the bottom, like when I tear into it a little bit, it feels like it's still a little raw, like it's not totally cooked. So I'm gonna put it back in on the bottom shelf of the oven and try to.
What do you think of putting it on the stovetop?
Ooh, that'd be an idea.
I don't know.
I also took the parchment paper off. I just slid out the parchment paper, so I'm gonna try just kind of. It just doesn't look brown on the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
It looks kind of like.
It's a little doughy still, huh?
Yeah. So I'm gonna put it back in on the bottom of the oven and see how it goes. The cheese is all like browned and bubbly.
It looks
so
delicious.
I don't know what I did there, but
very cool.
I'm sure it'll taste delicious anyway.
Absolutely. Hey, Annie, I think you were showing off yours a little bit ago, but I didn't have a chance to call on you. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Here it is. Add some basil on top after it was done.
Wow.
Turned out pretty well.
That's beautiful. Is this the first time you've ever made pizza?
Yep.
Amazing. It looks so good. You want to come join me there?
Thanks.
Anybody else want to show off their pizzas? You can raise your hands by raising your pizza. Nathan, do you and your family want to share?
Yeah, so this was our first time making a pizza without a pre-made crust. So we made one that the kids would appreciate. So mostly cheese and sausage.
Yum. Looks beautiful.
Yeah, crispy underneath. I think I put too much flour underneath. I can taste the flour underneath the pizza, but it's good.
Hey, that's
Super
a good
fun.
low-risk approach to making sure it comes off the pan. The other way is pretty interesting. I don't know if you've ever had like pizza cereal, but I still eat it even if I have to scrape it off the pan, and it's a mess. Congratulations.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mark, I was curious how it's going over there for you all. Actually, it looks like he's super busy pulling pizza out of the oven. Maybe I shouldn't call on you.
I just put a pizza in the oven.
Oh.
It's not done yet.
Can you show us through the oven door?
That's a good question.
Yep.
It's just started there. Just pepperoni. This one's for my daughter first.
Okay,
Oh.
your oven door is a lot cleaner than our oven door.
Yeah.
I had to let my dough rise a little bit more. I started kneading it because I didn't like the consistency, and so I had to let it sit for an hour. So I just started putting it all together.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to put pressure on anyone else, but is there anyone who didn't get called on that wants to share? I don't know if there's any other pizzas.
I just took mine out. I don't think I put enough tomato sauce on it.
Oh, yours looks great. I don't know. Let's see.
It's definitely like, it's brown on the bottom. I just got a pizza stone, so I used the pizza stone, but I don't think I put enough olive oil on the crust.
You want to take a bite and report back? It looks pretty good to me. I'd eat it. How about you, Dan? Did you make a pizza?
I did, and I already ate it.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome.
It just the whole top was just this like yellow color.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look like yours where you had individual pieces of cheese that looked nice.
Well, you know what? You can join us next weekend and make one then.
No, I'll probably make one more.
Yeah, there you go. Don't wait for me.
But definitely the temperature in the oven on the parchment paper that made the crust crispier than any of the previous ones I've made, and I've never made one where I made the dough myself, just always used pre-made packets, so this was good.
Awesome. Well, I'm so thrilled you could all join. Anyone else want to chime in?
I actually got a question for you, Danielle.
Yeah.
So I've never made my own dough before, but I have bought dough from the local Italian pizzeria, and I can't seem to get this dough as thin as I can get their Napolita style dough. Any idea what might be causing that?
So is it tearing, or when you say you can't get
You're
it
muted.
that thin? Oh. Yeah, so my question is it tearing, or what is happening that's making it hard to get it thin?
It's just, it keeps, like if I squish it, it just shrinks back. Squish it and it just shrinks back.
Oh. Actually,
And
you're
just-
in a rare camp where you've probably created so much gluten kneading it that it just needs to rest for a little while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I would, if you can, I mean, I know it's like dinner time, but if you can, you could set it aside for like 30 minutes and it's probably just been handled a lot. So yeah, it's stretching back, but you can be really aggressive
Right.
with it too. So like you can, because it has so much gluten, you can probably stretch
Well,
it
I
even
even tried a
more.
rolling pin on it to see how far I could get it to thin.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't go very thin.
Wow. Well, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that if you let it sit, it will relax, and then you could try
Okay.
to roll it again.
That's good advice. Thanks.
Yeah, good luck. Cool. Well, I want to be cognizant that everyone's with their families, cooking and eating and drinking wine, and probably want to hang out with each other. But this has been so cool, and thanks for joining me on this experiment. Cheers to all of you and your creativity and your families.
Thank you so much, Danielle. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I will send an email about the next one. We'll probably do more pizza, but I think we'll also mix in some other things. So if you've got requests, on the list of things I'm good at making includes like things like homemade ice cream. We did a year of burgers. We're pretty good at grilling. So like these are very like all American dinner things, but also it's like fun to get good at them because everybody likes these foods. So please let me know what you would like to learn to cook and we can do it together.